All right. Well, yesterday at the Zoom session, I proved once again that I am basically an idiot. What happened was I started the recording, um, and then the different versions of Zoom and Duo and Skype and all the different stuff that I use, they're all slightly different. Even the same application, like Zoom, is different at City than it is at State as it is at the UC. And so it gets sometimes a little bizarre trying to remember where things are and what they are and how they're working. And I inadvertently paused it and never remembered to restart the recording. So as a result, I am re-recording what I did yesterday, and hopefully I'll be able to cover it in a way that makes sense. And then I'll put this up with the um, rest of the recording that I do have. I have up to the pause point, and I'll append those. I'll make them all one, and then we'll go from there. So, this is the introduction to Applied Anthropology. Here is my basic stuff. I'm Dr. Michael Eisinger. I have a Ph.D. from UC Merced in World Cultures, which is interdisciplinary history and anthropology. I have a master's degree from Fresno State in history. I have bachelor's degrees from Fresno State in both history and anthropology. I have an associate degree in the social sciences and an associate degree in computer programming. Um, Academia is my third career. I started out many years ago as a disc jockey. I spent about 13, 14 years doing that. Later, I spent another 10 years doing internet radio. I currently do a talk show on 88.1 KFCF on Wednesdays called The Struggle at 5 p.m. So I keep my fingers into radios, and I have ever since 1979 when I started. Um, Sandwiched in the middle there, I had a 20-year career as a computer programmer. And when I reached burnout there, I went back to school at age 48. At 48, I had one associate degree, and between the ages of 48 and 60, I finished a second associate, two bachelor's, a master's, and a Ph.D. Written several books. I've written a number of articles. I do lots of presentations at conferences. And my research focuses on what I refer to as historically rural African American settlements in the San Joaquin Valley. These are towns um, or neighborhoods that at some point between the 1880s and the present have been all or majority African American. And there are about 3 dozen of them. If you go to my website, which you can see it there, it's meisinger.com. If you go to the website, there's a link to a map that'll show you where most of those are, along with little blurbs on what some of them are, as well as lists of my publications and talks and everything, including a recently recorded public talk that was done via Skype, or not via Skype, it might have been Zoom. Anyway, whatever it was done by, I did it for a group up at UC Merced. We recorded it, and it's available. You can find it on YouTube. The easiest way to get hold of me is through Canvas, and I really would prefer you use that than the CSU email. In fact, that's wrong. That should be mail@fresnostate.edu. Don't use my email. Use Canvas. That way everything is in the course and I don't lose it. If you send it into my emails, because I get emails, I've taught at numerous schools. I have email accounts at all of them that are all still active because I still do occasionally teach at them. And so I often will lose emails from students. So the best thing is to keep it in Canvas. That way it stays with the class and I know where it is. I don't have an office, so office hours, of course, would be virtual anyway. If you do need to talk, just get a hold of me and we will work out something. If we need to meet face to face, we can do Skype or Duo or Zoom, or we can talk on the phone, or we can email, whatever we want to do. That's anything's available. That's by arrangement, by appointment. This course is to familiarize you with applied, or as they call it in Europe, engaged anthropology. This is a subgenre underneath sociocultural anthropology, or social anthropology as we call it here in the United States. It is a subdiscipline in anthropology. It is also a profession. There are people who their entire job is to do anthropology and applying it. Now, that could be, majority of that is in the nonprofit sector. A lot of activism is driven by professional anthropologists. It's also useful in things like marketing and product design and looking at things like efficiencies and practices and habits and all kinds of stuff. So it's important for business. It is important for agriculture. It's in business for essentially it's important for just about any human endeavor. We employ both basic and applied research, primarily with the idea of understanding the human condition and solving problems. The nice thing about history is you just tell what happened. In anthropology, you show what you see, and you offer some solutions. So there's both a passive and an active aspect, especially of applied or engaged anthropology. About half the professional anthropologists who work in applied or engaged contexts work in the non-academic world, either in government, in NGOs and other nonprofits, or in the corporate world. This is a writing intensive course. We're going to learn about applied anthropology, we're going to learn about anthropology, but we're also going to be working on trying to get you that W designation so you can graduate. Just a reminder, anthropology comes from the Greek anthropos and ology, so human, the study of, or the study of humans. In the United States, we have four basic subdivisions of anthropology: cultural, or as it's called in Europe, social. I usually will just use the term socio-cultural, which is the combination of the two. This looks at human endeavors basically contemporaneously. We will visit a community, repeatedly over decades, and each visit describes that time, not making something definitive about that culture as an overall stamp. In other words, it's very much what was there when the anthropologist was there to observe it. What did they see? How did it work? And what do they think it means? The second major subdivision, there are four major subdivisions in the U.S., three in Europe. The second major subdivision is linguistic anthropology. Now, we don't do linguistic anthropology here at Fresno State, primarily because linguistics here is under the language department. However, over the years, many of the instructors in the linguistics classes have either been from the anthropology department or anthropologists hired by under linguistics to teach those classes, because that's where we belong. So people like Noam Chomsky, he's a socialist. I mean, a socialist. Well, he's a socialist, but he's a sociologist. He's a linguist, and as such, you would combine that, and essentially he would be a cultural linguistic anthropologist. The third that I want to talk about, and we won't be dealing much with this at all, is what we refer to as biological or physical anthropology. And this deals with primatology and with human anatomy and human-related anatomy. So the whole pre-human precursors or close relatives of humans are studied as part of biological or physical. And those of you that are looking at doing forensics and things like that, you've watched Bones or CSI or something, and you see all this number one. I hate to tell you this, but in this entire country, there are only 3 anthropologists who are ever paid to do that type of work full time. Most of what happens in most cities, in most states throughout this country and much of Europe, is when a body is found and they need somebody to look at it, they just hire the nearest archaeologist or osteologist from the local college or university, and that's who does it. So if you want to be Bones or you want to be those lab techs in CSI, good luck. You can do it as a volunteer all you want, or you can trade it out for beer or something like that. Even here in Fresno, the general area's got 1 million people. It is 2 of our faculty, one or the other or both. They're both the sheriff and the almost every local police department calls, because they're the 2 people in the Fresno County who are most qualified to do it. No one is paid full time for that. So if you think you want to be the next great lab tech that's going to reinvent the world and have 3D holograms recreating the crime, it's great on TV. It doesn't exist in real world. The fourth in the United States is archaeology. And the reason that archaeology is under anthropology in the United States is because there's a clear line between white people and the other. And so if you scrape the dirt here, you get white occupation, until you scrape down a little bit farther and you may get natives. And within the anthropological world, ethnohistory evolved, which was a combination of cultural, linguistic, and archaeology, but it was specifically geared initially to Native Americans. And so, because in American anthropology, Native Americans were othered, it moved into anthropology, not history. In Europe and in England, if you scrape the dirt, you leave the modern world and you hit the Victorian world, and you scrape beyond that and you'll end up at the Tudors or the Regency, and then you'll end up, before that you'll end up at Anglo-Saxon, and before that you'll end up with medieval or Dark Ages, and before that you'll end up with Roman, and you keep digging and you'll end up with Iron Age, and dig below that and you'll get to Bronze Age, and you dig below that and you'll get to Neolithic, and then Mesolithic, and then Paleolithic, and you go all the way back to the earliest, half a million years ago, to the earliest residents of England. But they're all in the soil. And so in Europe, and especially in the UK, archaeology is under history, because that's what it is. It's the physical representation of history. Here, because we don't have any link between the original inhabitants, even in places like Mexico, culturally the link is so severe that there is just a hard line between what came before and what came after the contact with Europeans on the American continent. And so archaeology here falls under anthropology because it is the study of the other, as opposed to in Europe, where the history of the land where you live goes straight down, right? I'll ask my U.S. history students or my California history students, what happened here in 1775? And they will always tell me something that happened in Concord or Boston or somewhere in the East Coast, because I think I'm talking about U.S. history. What I'm really talking about is what happened here in California in 1775. The first Spaniard entered the San Joaquin Valley, so the first contact of Anglos or whites, of Europeans. Spanish really can't be called Anglos, can they? The first Europeans to enter the San Joaquin Valley happened in 1775, because that's the history of here. Or I'll ask them questions about, when they took California history, what did they talk about? And when you went to California history, I'd be willing to bet that you talked about two things in fourth grade: the gold rush, and before that, the missions. Well, did it dawn on you that for 350 years that where you live now used to be part of Spain? Let me say that again. It was part of Spain for 350 fucking years, longer than it's been part of the United States. And yet we don't consider Spanish history to be our history. And so you studied the missions, which is Spanish history, but you were never told that the missions were disbanded and actually were in disarray. The mission you went to was rebuilt in the late 19th, early 20th century. Because when it became Mexico, the church was stripped of most of its property, and most of those missions went to ruin. Thank goodness, because it freed the natives. But that was never taught to you. Why? Because that's not U.S., even though that's the history of where you live. And so then you jump to the gold rush. Well, that's California becoming a state, right? The gold rush was huge. There were larger gold rushes. There were gold rushes that made a lot more people rich, but it didn't get Anglos or Europeans to replace the Spanish and indigenous population of California as rapidly as a one-sided gold rush would be, where natives, people of African descent, and especially Asians, would be excluded from any opportunity to make it rich in the gold fields of California. So you skip from Spanish history that nobody tells you it's Spanish history. You miss Mexico completely, because where you live used to be Mexico. And if you're of Mexican-American heritage, this has been your land for a hell of a lot longer than it's been most white people's land. But we don't teach you about Mexico in California history because we don't want to point out that connection. And that is why archaeology in the U.S. is not under history, it's under anthropology. Back to talking about the course, this fulfills your area MI goal, your multicultural international. It also, so that's your GE that this will fulfill. This also fulfills your upper division W if your major does not have a W. Some majors do have a W. For example, when I got my bachelor's degree in history, I had to take a history, it was called History 100, but it was the History W class, and it wasn't open to non-majors, it was only open to majors. Anthropology doesn't have its own specific W. We have 3 different W's, and the majors tend to pick, a few here and a few there. The majority of the students that take our upper division W classes are from those majors that don't have writing requirements. So you're fulfilling your university requirement, but not your majors requirement. And so the majority of you in this class are ag majors, art majors, music, art, theater, business majors, winology, the non-social science, and the non-academic. Most of those have their own upper division W, which is good because one, it exposes you to this material, and two, it gives us lots of classes to teach in Anthro, so it keeps some of us busy. Most semesters, every class I teach is a W. The one that isn't is when I teach the race class, which I'm not teaching this semester for some reason. Someone else wanted to teach it, so they're doing it instead. But that's the only upper division Anthro class that I don't have a W on that I teach. If you have arrived at Fresno State post 2018, so if you got here in 18, 19, or 20, you will take the final paper in this class and you will put that in your portfolio. If you came prior to that, you don't even know what a portfolio is, and so you can just ignore that part, but it is your final paper that must end up in your portfolio. Here are the 2 books. Now, the day after this was originally aired, I did find my PDF copy of Applied Anthropology, and I put a link up for that. And actually, I sent out an announcement. The link will stay there as long as the announcement's up. But you can also buy it if you want. And these are the 2 texts. The first one is the Social and Cultural Anthropology, a very short introduction by Monahan and Just. This is part of a series that Oxford produces, a very short, concise, and absolutely brilliant introductory texts on just about anything. You can look up, you can buy one of these little short introductions, about $7, $8 or less, depending on which it is, on everything from critical race theory to archaeology to games of chance to fashion in the 20s. I mean, there are like 11 or 1,400 titles in this very short introduction series. If I ever hit the lottery, I'm going to buy every one of them and then just sit there and read one through the other. The ones that have philosophy are great, and I've probably got a dozen of these already, and I drool every time I go and look at them. They are wonderful. I actually use this one in all of my anthropology classes, regardless, because it is a good. Everything that is in there you would find in a big $70 to a $200 cultural anthropology textbook. Except it doesn't have glossy paper, it doesn't have colored illustrations, it doesn't have lots of maps. There are a few maps and illustrations, but generally it's the text. There's no list of terms, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's missing, but the content, the concepts, and the construction is all there. And so I use it, and sometimes as the primary text, and otherwise as the secondary text for almost all of my upper and lower division anthropology classes. The second one is Kedia and Ben Willigan, and this is the Applied Anthropology Domains of Application. This is probably the standard textbook. I've seen it used more often than just about anything else. I've been using it for 5 years. And it is excellent at introducing the notion of applied anthropology, especially more of the applied and less of the engaged. And then it has chapter after chapter. I only assign about half the chapters, but if you look through it, if I haven't assigned a chapter that deals with your future job or your future career, I'd be willing to bet there's one that in this book that's close. It'd be a good place for you to start as we move forward. Because what this class should do is it should be preparing you for your after graduation to take some of the things you're going to learn in this class, the principles, the theory, and the methods, and then apply it in your future career. In fact, the title of your last paper is how will I use anthropological theory and methods in my future career as a blank. And so everything in this class is leading to that paper. You have two other large papers, pieces of which you can probably reference in your final paper, because they should all be feeding in, and I'll try to explain that as we go, and I'll be explaining it repeatedly throughout the run of the semester. Basic guidelines, typed, double-spaced, 1-inch margins all the way around, 12-point, a font like Times New Roman. Stay away from things like Courier. I want the reason that I'm very specific on the typefaces and the sizes and the margins is because that way I don't have to do word count. I know that if you use something equivalent to Times New Roman and you use 12-point and you double space with 1-inch margins, it's about 250 words per page, and I can just count them up. You have to do 5,000 words for this class. Oh, and I did the same thing happened yesterday. I had to stop this and make a correction that I've been trying to make in all of my PowerPoints for a very bizarre reason. And we will just ignore that I did that right now, and we'll just kind of do this. There. Now, spelling, grammar, that's all going to be included. Citations must be in Chicago inline format only, not Chicago footnote, which is usually called Turabian, but Chicago inline. It is similar to MLA and APA. You type to the end of the sentence, you put an open parenthesis, you put the author's name, you put a comma, you put a space, you put the page number, you put the closed parenthesis, you stick your period. You're done. That's all you got to do in line. The works cited has to follow the right format, which is alphabetical. You will receive a 0 on any paper. Now, this is not the regular assignments, just the 3 big papers and all of the pieces. You will receive a 0 if there are no citations. You will receive a 0 if there's no work cited. You must use Chicago inline. Anything else, you will get a 0. MLA, APA, I will 0 it, and you'll be done. Well, you won't be done. You got to redo it. The 0 is not the end of the world. The 0 is, I told you to do it this way, you didn't do it, go back and do it. Why do it twice, right? You know if you do it wrong, you're going to get a 0. Also, on your works cited page, it is a works cited page, not a reference page, not a bibliography. Those 3 terms have different meanings. Yes, they're all lists of books alphabetically. But a bibliography is just a list of books. I don't know that you've cited it or not. In fact, you're not required to. It could be you can list a bibliography where you've only read half the books or none of the books. They're just books on a topic. A reference page specifically intimates that everything on that page you read and you considered before writing what you were writing, but you didn't cite from every one of them. So there may be entries in the reference page for background that don't have specific citations in the text. And a work cited is for each unique work that is cited in line. You have an entry in the work cited, and so it's work that has been cited, and you cited it and you put it in the work cited. And that should be a 1-to-1 correlation. If you cite the same book 6 times, it's still only on the work cited once, but there should be nothing in the citations that isn't in the work cited, and nothing in the work cited that isn't in the citations, and we do check. Websites are not where you're going to do this. You're going to do all of this stuff in the Madden Library. Anywhere else, Google Scholar, websites, Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, Ask, whatever, fuck that. You're going to go to the library. You're going to search through the Madden Library because this is your senior writing project, and you're going to use scholarly sources. Form, structure, content, all are part of the grade on your papers. I could have just given you one 20-page paper to write, but I didn't. And so you have 3 primary papers. And if you follow all the guidelines, we should get to the 5,000 word. If you don't, I have a buffer, and that is in the discussion boards. Almost all the work in this class is done through discussion boards. I strongly suggest you download Grammarly into your web browser and turn it on, because if you're for the first few weeks, I'm not going to deduct points for grammar and spelling, but I will as time goes on, because this is a W class. I hate to say this, but it's almost, it's a combination of English and anthropology. And so if you, the only way that I can use your discussion posts as part of the 5,000 words is if you're using the same rigor to write those posts, right? We're not tweeting here. You're not Donald Trump that can put everything in all caps and misspelled. You need to actually use proper grammar, proper citations, or not citations in your post, but proper grammar, proper spelling, proper punctuation. I know some of you are going to do your posts on your phone. That's fine. But it still has to look like you did it on your keyboard. Let's see. All right. That's pretty good. Overall concept of the class is to demonstrate that there are ways that you can use theory and our practices in your profession or vocation in the future. We're going to try to give you the simplest and most cursory level tools that hopefully you'll be able to use both in work and in your life. As I said before, everything is part of one big puzzle. All of your online reading and videos and audio blogs that I ask you to listen to, those are all related to either laying out what anthropology is and what it does, or the specifics of application or engagement. And so that's the online stuff. The 3 papers, one of which is an ethnography. You're going to go find an ethnography that is related to your industry or major or future career or what you want to be when you grow up, and you're going to write a report about it. It's pretty straightforward. But I bet you'll be able to use that same ethnography, that same book, when you write your final paper, because it's about anthropological studies of your industry. So that would be perfect. Second is an ethics paper. And this has multiple moving parts, and I'll try to go through each of them at some point here. But these are, again, it is you read, you post. You're going to read the Statement of Professional Responsibilities, which is our ethics statement in anthropology from the American Anthropological Association. You're going to read a number of case studies, and you're going to discuss in depth those case studies with your classmates. You're then going to take one of those case studies and extract the thread from the discussion board where you're in it, and you're going to edit that down to a 3-page paper, just a 3-page transcript, edited transcript of that conversation. That's part of the paper. Actually, two buckets. We're going to turn it into 2 separate papers here. Then you're going to write a paper about that process. And here's a good place for you to write down some notes. Here's how this paper should look. You're going to start the paper by describing and outlining the American Anthropological Association's Statement of Professional Responsibility, which I normally refer to as the ethics statement. Then you're going to describe the case study that you chose. Third, you're going to examine the edited transcript that you've got. Try to flesh it out. Try to get in there what you were thinking or what you thought the other people were thinking. And then finally, you'll wrap that paper by giving your conclusions. So it's a paper that should write itself. And then you combine that with the transcript. It's 2 separate documents, 2 separate buckets in Canvas, but that is the ethics paper assignment. Because when you go out and you deal with human subjects, which is what anthropology does, just like medicine. That's why, like medicine, like the law, like psychiatry, like some other departments, other majors, other professions, we have an ethics statement. When I go out to do research as a member of this institution, I actually have to go through the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, to get my research approved before I can do it. If I were a reporter, I wouldn't have to do that. I could just go do it. But before I can go out in the field and do it, I have to clear it with the institution, because I'm dealing with human subjects. And then your final paper is the how I will use anthropological methods and theory in my future career as a blank. Hopefully you won't be a blank. Hopefully you'll be something. And that's where you get to take everything we learned in the class, plus some additional research on your specific field, and come up with a paper that hopefully will be useful for you. One is your writing example, and two, really giving you the groundwork that you need in order to get through your world later. Now at this point, I want to go to Canvas. So I'm going to close this down for a minute, and I'm going to go to Canvas. I should have preloaded our class. Huh? Did I? Nope, that's the wrong school even. Here we go. Here's your class. So let's talk about Canvas a little bit. I have Canvas set up in modules, and these are done by week. And so as you look through here, you'll see that each week has a due date at the top. Everything in that bucket is due that week, and everything, and I do mean everything in that bucket. So some weeks it's not a lot. Other weeks, as you can see as I'm scrolling through here, there are more things to do. They're all there for your dining and dancing pleasure. You can get to any of them you can get to any of them early, you just can't get to them late. So this first bucket, student information, this is where your syllabus is, and if you notice, these first four all have due dates. The syllabus, the writing guidelines, the university policies, and the standards for writing course requirements. Those are, and hopefully I've got them all right, if not, I'll fix them at some point. Those all have a one-question quiz, each worth 2 points. You go in, you do the reading, and you you pick true or false. And if you pick true, it says on there that by clicking true, you certify that you have read it, understood it, and understand you're being held responsible for it. I do this for two reasons. One, I've got a good indication that if you click it, you might have read it. And two, later when we have a disagreement, if I'm the one that screws up, we know why. And if you're the one that screws up, I can say, but you said you read it, right? So it's really just a way to get you 8 more points more than anything else. And that's your syllabus, those first 4 blocks. The litter box is your space. You can go in there and you can talk to, you can put up anything you want. You can talk about what an asshole your instructor is. You can talk about the work sucks. You can talk whatever you want. This is for you to talk to your classmates. I will never, ever read what's in the litter box. So it is completely anonymous. I've been using this for 6 or 7 years in different classes in different colleges and universities, and I have never once read the litter box. So it truly is your space. There's some other stuff up here that you might want to look at. Number 1 is how to email your professor without being annoying. Some of you need to read that. Next is EndNote. Now, citations are a pain in the ass. I know that. You know that. Everybody knows that. I will show you in a little bit how to use Word, if you're using Word, or your word processor, whatever you're using, if you can figure out how to do it, how it can actually do inline citations for you. Chicago is one of the basic defaults. It comes loaded in Word. You don't have to know how to do it. You can just use that. But EndNote is a program, it costs about $650, $700, that has 32,000 at least different citation formats for publications all over the world, for publishers, for different disciplines. And you just key the information in, it stores it in a database, and you use it as needed. I started building my database as an undergraduate when I was at Fresno State many years ago, and I have essentially every citation that I used as an undergrad throughout my master's program and my Ph.D. Every citation is stored in my EndNote database, and I have an online version of it if I have to hit it from somewhere else. And so I don't have to keep looking for those texts. I know where they are. Now, that is free to you as long as you maintain your CSU email. Your Fresno State email, you go to the Madden Library, search for the word EndNote, EndNote. It will then take you to a download. You key in your email. It says, yes, you are legit. And you then download this $700 program yours for free for nothing. You can then install it. It will go right into Word. It'll be completely integrated into your word processor, and you never have to learn how to do another citation ever in your life. Do you think I know how to do Chicago Inline? You're wrong if you think I do. I don't. Why? Because I let the computer do it. I have to switch between Chicago Inline and Turabian because I write in both disciplines. It's a real pain when I'm trying to resubmit an article or for trying to put together a compilation, because some of my work is written as history, some of it is written as anthropology, and it's cited properly for that mess. If it weren't for EndNote, if it weren't for the electronic version of citation management, it'd be completely and totally a nightmare. It would be completely undoable. So this is free for you. You download it, install it, keep it forever. I do. Every couple of years I go and get whatever the newest version is and keep going from there. That help ask your peers, that's coming off. Sorry about that. That's duplicate. And then here, I believe I did upload it. Yeah, here it is. Here is your sample bibliography and some guidelines on how to do it. You will use this. You will use the abstract section of this to do the abstract for your ethnography paper, and for your final paper you will produce an abstract and an annotated bibliography. So this is all here in the student information section. When we get to week 1, this would be our first set of things, and you'll notice that everything here, almost everything here, is a discussion. You started with the hello, my name is. Unfortunately, I don't have it clear in the instructions. You must do 3 posts. Each post must have a minimum of 100 words. I went in and I wrote a new block and I copied and pasted into every one of them. I forgot to do this one. Oops. So many of you have only done 1 post, maybe 1 long one, or maybe 1 long one and 10 little short ones. Please make sure that you have a minimum of 3 posts that are 100 words in length. That's what you need to be focusing on for all of them. So that's just an introductory one. I want you to engage. The next one is a lecture that I recorded. It kind of gives you the basics of how anthropology evolved as a discipline and how we view the world. And then we get into the textbooks. The first one, of course, is the Keddy and Van Willigen. Chapter 1 is a good introduction of applied anthropology. Monahan, in just a very short introduction, is a good introduction to sociocultural anthropology, so you can meld those two together. And then Savage to Self, episode 1, which is the BBC podcast by a lady named Gerald, and it is brilliant, it is wonderful, it has great examples, and it, combined with the lecture and those 2 chapters, really rounds out and should give you a pretty good picture of what we're doing. The final entry in that week 1 is the upcoming Zoom sessions through September 22nd. I went ahead, I also sent out an announcement, but you'll see here are all of the Zoom sessions for all 5 sections that we'll be holding between now and September 22nd. There are a couple of times when there is no class session, either because there should be 2 of those. There should be 1 there, and there should be, yeah, they're there. One because September 9th is Labor Day, and the one on September, so the Monday night class will not be able to meet. The Monday, Wednesday, Friday class will meet on Wednesday. The Tuesday, Thursday class, the 11 o'clock one I can make, but the other one, there's already chemo scheduled for my wife for that hour, so you get to take that week off. I want you to either go to one of the other sessions. So you could go to any of the 2 sessions on Monday. Same with the Monday night people. You could go back and you could either join us in the 3 sections for that Monday and Tuesday, the 9th and the 10th of September. If you're in one of the 2 classes that has no session, you can join one of the other sessions. Or you can wait till the video is put up and just watch that. That will work just as well. In fact, that you can go to any session. That's available to all of you. If something comes up and you can't make the regular time, you can either go to alternatively go to one of the other sessions, or you can just wait till one of them is uploaded and do it. I'm not going to upload 5 versions of the Zoom meeting, so what will probably happen is I will put up the first, And then if I see anything that should have been covered in all 5 but was only covered in 1, I'll edit that out and attach it to the others. But the bulk of it is going to be probably the first one done is the one that I'm going to upload, and that'll be available to everybody. So that is there. Once I know the schedule beyond September 22nd, I will work on that. You'll also get a notice at the beginning of each week with a list of all of the available sessions for that week. So that's coming up. And if we come back and look at the week 2, you see, week 2, again, here's a lecture. In this case, we're talking about methods. The first time we're going to talk about how anthropology does what we do differently than what other people do. One of you pointed out in one of the discussions that a lot of it sounds a lot like sociology. Well, sociology and anthropology in the 1860s were the same course. They were together. There was no difference. In fact, even today, if you go to India and you want to get a degree in anthropology, you come out with a degree in sociology. But in Europe and the United States, we understand that is sociocultural anthropology. The sociology there is what it is. Now, what's the difference between sociology and anthropology? Methods. Sociology is very much more data-driven than anthropology. A lot of polls, a lot of surveys, a lot of structured interviews where the same question is asked of lots and lots of different people, and then the aggregate numbers are combined and massaged. And they're really good at it. Anthropology, on the other hand, a lot of the same theory, a lot of the same practice, a lot of the same basics, but our methods of research are very different. We use surveys, we use structured interviews, but they're down the list on ours. Our primary one is what we call participatory observation. We go to a culture or a society, which could be a doctor's office or a village in the bush, right? When we're talking about observation, it can be done anywhere. You can do it at the mall, you can do it in a group home, you can do it in a hospital, you can do it, my son wrote a paper years ago, presented at a conference down in the Queen Mary, on a internet community called Creepypasta. In other words, you know, communities can be defined in lots of different ways. Gaming communities are a huge interest of anthropology right now because, you know, what is the role of women in gaming communities? Right? They're primarily male-dominated, yet there are women who like playing games. How do they deal with the bullshit that's piled on them by their male counterparts? Do they come on and they're women, but they pretend to be men, and so they use male names, or do they? You know? So there's all kinds. There is not an aspect of society that we cannot observe, but we do our research by observing, by participating. Right? That's why it's called participatory observation. You go, you observe, you get your hands wet, you do it, you become part of it, and you try to understand it. That's the first way. The second thing that we do that's a little different than history and or sociology, of course, history has a version of this, is what we call life histories or life stories, or oral histories is what we call it in history. And that is a pretty much free-form, somewhat directed interview with a subject, taking anywhere from an hour to 2 in great detail with very few standard questions. In other words, you let the interview go where the interview goes rather than have a preconceived notion of the questions you want asked. One of the differences between anthropology is we never go into a community expecting to prove something. We might go in thinking we're going to see specific things, but we don't use the scientific method of a hypothesis, we're going to test it and prove it. We go in and we observe. We go into interview, we go in and we start with, so, what's your name? When were you born? And how old are you? Where were you born? Tell me about your life. You want to talk about childhood? You want to talk about everything since then? You can talk about anything. And then we also use surveys. We also use more structured mechanisms, and then it's the combination of all of those. And then, of course, if you would walk over to sociology today and talk to any of Gendin or any of the other sociology faculty over there, you would see that some of them do ethnography. In fact, the current chair considers herself to be an ethnographic sociologist, which is called a cultural anthropologist, as far as I'm concerned. But she's the head of the sociology department, and she and I've talked about me potentially teaching classes in Soc, as well as history and anthropology, because I'm this weird hybrid thing. So we'll be talking about our primary modes of operation on week 2. And this is just every week we go through this. And just here's writing assignment number 1. That's the ethnography. You need to write an abstract. Look at the instructions there. Look at the sample that's loaded up in the student section. Just go through it. Now, one thing I want, there are 2 points I really want to make about, one about Canvas, and that is, if you're using it on your phone, always choose modules view. Don't rely on the to-do list, because when you get into week 3, we're going to be hitting ethics. And this is where you'll read the principles of professional responsibility, and you will start working on your case studies. Now, these case studies are discussions, but they're not labeled as such. It's labeled as it's part of the ethics assignment, and it's a case study. And there's no due date on here. So if you go in through your to-do list, you'll get down to when this paper is due and you'll not have read or done a single thing. I've had this happen to students in the past because they knew what they were doing on their phone, because the old motherfucker didn't know what he was talking about. Use the modules. Don't use assignments. Don't use discussions. Don't use quizzes. Don't use any of those options. Either on your desktop, hit home or hit modules. I've set it up so that everything is in a 1-week block. Everything you need to do is in that week, or begins in that week. But it's all there. You go in any other way, you're gonna screw yourself. So you'll notice as we go on into week 4, here's the ethics, another case study, right? And it goes on. Week 5, well, week 5, here's the case study, and here is the abstract and bibliography for your 3rd writing assignment. Right? See, these overlap. They have to, because they're just your time. And then as we go through, you'll see that the rest of the semester falls out as it does. So that's pretty much Canvas, I think, in a nutshell. So we can come back to our PowerPoint now, and we can go on. The next thing I'm going to do is, rather than re-record what I'm about to go through, is I'm going to stop this recording and append to it the recorded version of this that I did a couple of years ago on how to use this for Anthro papers, because it's all there. I know it's all there and I won't miss something. So this recording is going to stop here and then be edited into another video. So I won't be coming back after this. I will see you next week at your Zoom session, and we'll take it from there. If you've ever been to one of my lectures, you know I always tell my students it took me 34 years to get my bachelor's degree, primarily because I had a typewriter. I can't spell. I'm lousy at formatting. I'm lousy at trying to edit while I type. I always end up rewriting things. And so the word processor by itself, I mean, the only reason I was ever able to get all the degrees that I have is that I had a word processor. And in that word processor was a spell checker, a grammar checker, and even a citation generator. And those are the things that I want to show you today, because they're essential for you to understand how to do some of the stuff that I require for your class, citations in the proper format. In this case, Chicago Inline. This is an Anthro class, so you're required to do Chicago Inline. And how to set up the grammar and the spelling so that basically from this point on your papers are going to be much, much better, and you're never going to give me anything that is ungrammatical or spelled wrong. At least that's the goal. So before we go any farther, I want to cover a few specifics. These are generic to all of the papers in any of my courses. They probably are very similar to what you have in other classes, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So first of all papers turned in should be double-spaced. There are exceptions to that: block quotes, headers, things like that, your footnotes, if you have any, which should be endnotes, not footnotes. But in those cases, those should all be single-spaced, but the bulk of your paper should be double-spaced. Indent the first line 1/2 inch. And I'll show you how to do all these settings in just a real quick minute. There should be no extra space between paragraphs. Most of you, when you got Word initially, or when you accessed Word initially, it had a default to stick extra space between paragraphs. And what I want you to do is go in, and I'll show you how to do that. Go in and set that so that it doesn't automatically insert spaces, because I'm always marking little arrows, too much space, remove space, etc. And it's really something that you can do in just a couple of clicks and you will never have the problem again. But it's necessary in order for your papers to all be standard so that they all look alike. Why do they all look alike? So that when I'm looking at it, I know exactly how many words there are per page. I know whether you're padding, etc., etc. So it's just to make it consistent. I don't want a cover page or folder. Very few, if any, papers are going to be turned in physically in your class. Most of it's going to be done electronically through Google Drive or something comparable to that. But I don't need a cover page. I don't want a cover page. Even though it's not wasting any paper, it's not necessary. Simply put the header at the top of the page and enter your title and start writing on the very first page. On the first page, I do want the name, the date, and the course number. That way I know, even though you're in the right place, you might, for some reason, have put it in the wrong place. So this is just easier for me to keep it clear. I want that in the upper left or right-hand corner, and I want it single-spaced. You can always go back and reformat it. If the default's double and it comes out that way, go back and make it single-spaced before you try to turn it in. I also want 1-inch margins all the way around. Now, different versions of Word have had different defaults. They've had 1 1/4, they've had 1 1/2. Maybe yours are set to 3/4. But if you set them all to 1-inch margins, then I know that you are not padding, essentially. If you have margins other than 1 inch, then it's harder for me to gauge, just by looking at the page, how many words you have on there. And that's important. This is a W class, or if it isn't a W class, at least I'm requiring very similar requirements. And word count is important, and I use how the page is filled up to ascertain what it is, in addition to using the automatic counters in Word. And I want the pages numbered, but I don't want the first page numbered, so I will also show you how to do that. And if you follow those, at least your formatting is going to be absolutely perfect. So what we're looking at right now is a couple of pages from a document I wrote a while back. The content doesn't matter. It's the formatting that I want us to talk about. So the first thing I want us to look at is essentially the paragraph setup. So if we go over here to Home, and you notice that there are all these styles. These are called styles, and they set up different types of formatting. And if you learn how to use these, they will help you a great deal. So normally, every document defaults to the, no pun intended, normal template. These are templates that give formatting instructions to Word. And so you'll see that this particular paragraph that I'm at right now is formatted with the normal format. And if we go up here and we look at the actual formatting for it, we'll notice that it is exactly what I just talked about. Double space, 0 points after, 0 points before. We want the first line indented by 1/2 inch, and we want it aligned left. We're not doing any outline levels. Some people like to do justified. Don't do it. It makes it harder to read, and they all should be left justified here. So that's your very first thing. Now, if your normal isn't set up like that, set it to look just like this. Click OK. Now go up to the normal style in your style bucket here. Right click on it, and you will see Update Normal to Match Selection. If you click that, that will save in your template these settings for normal. And now every time you go into it, they'll be there. So a couple things I want to talk about that we're going to do here. That's how to set the defaults. The other thing I want to do at this particular point is I want to insert page numbers. And if you remember right, I told you that I wanted page numbers, and I don't want the first page numbered. So here I'm at the bottom of page 1 right here. This is page 2, page 3, page 4. So what we're going to do is going to go to Insert, and then go over to Page Number. Now, I don't really care where you put them. I tend to put them at the bottom of the page, and I tend to put them way over on one side. That's just my preference. I don't care. You can center them, you can put them on the top, you can put them on the bottom. Don't put them in the margins. Just put them either in the top footer, the top header, or the bottom footer. So I'm going to pick, in this case, to put it over in this corner. Now, look right here, right where I am right now. See where the mouse is? It says different first page, and you'll notice here is page 1. If I click this button, that goes away, but they continue to be on page 2. So here's where it was. Here's where page 2 goes. And so what I want to do now is I want to show you how to set up some defaults in the proofing tools that Word provides. Again, I've said before, if you're using a different word processor, I'm assuming that these functions exist. They are in most modern word processors, but I don't know where they are, so you'll have to find them. They're also maybe in a different place depending on your version of Word, or whether you're using Windows, or whether you are using the the Mac version of it. So Windows, Mac, other word processors, they're all going to be a little bit different, but I would imagine that most of these functions exist in most of these applications. So here we are back in our document, and I want to go up to the File menu and then down to Options. And this is where we're going to get the chance to set the settings that will be your defaults throughout. And so here we go to Proofing Tools. Usually it's, at least in the different versions of Word that I have, it's usually about the third one down on this Options menu. Proofing. Now, ignoring words in uppercase, that's your option. If you that way it won't tell you things like UNESCO or spelled wrong. But if you think you're going to need to check uppercase words, then you should turn that one on. I tend to leave it off. Ignore words that contain numbers, ignore internet and file addresses, so URLs won't be spell checked. Flag repeated words. That one's crucial because very often we'll be typing and then we'll type an extra the, or something like that. This will flag that and let you know that it happens. If you're not writing in French, don't care about that. Most of you don't have separate custom dictionaries, so just leave that blank and it'll sort that out. French modes, again, you're not using it. If you also use Spanish as well as English in your word processor, you might want to set some of the settings here. These are not the crucial ones. These up here I do care about. And then as we scroll down a little bit, we see when correcting spelling and grammar in Word, ... check spelling as you type. That way it'll catch them as you make the errors. Mark grammar errors as you type. Frequently confused words. That's the blue squiggles where the word is spelled right, but it's the wrong word in that particular context. And then check the grammar with the spelling, and that's really, really important. This readability statistics, this will allow you to see what grade level you're writing at. Most newspapers, for example, are written on a 6th grade level. Magazines are written probably at an 8th to 10th grade level. Most college textbooks are written on a 10th grade level for lower division classes. They go up from there. But this would allow you to actually see at what level you're writing. And if you're coming up, at pretty low levels, you might want to start thinking about your word choices, your sentence structures, things like that. Now, this is where the most important thing is right here where it says grammar and more. In my case, I've got grammar and more. It might say grammar and spelling. It might have a number of different options here depending on which version you're using. But I want it to be most inclusive. So in this case, I'm going to choose grammar and more. And then so in this case, I'm going to choose grammar and more, and then I'm going to click settings. And this brings up a huge list of stuff. And I really want everything checked. So, agreement between the noun and adverb, noun phrases, capitalization of March and May. Those are months that may or may not be months. They are also regular words. Comma after greetings. Just essentially turn everything on. Even here, you see I have some that are turned off. I'm going to turn these all on because I want all of these to be flagged when I'm writing, because these are all common stylistic and grammatical things that we want to focus on. Definitely turn on contractions. We want to use a very formal language. I want it to be flagged if I'm too informal. I want slang flagged. Essentially, 90% of what we are looking for, we want to be
it's right here in this dialog box. The Oxford comma, that's that comma that says I've got 3 items in a list. Do I put a comma after the second one before the and or the or? I would think that for 90% of your writing you would want that comma. I gave an example the other day in one of my classes where I had 2 items, and then I put the comma and the word and then I had 2 items that were essentially grouped together. And so that comma was necessary to differentiate between the first and, which linked the first 2 and the what came after that, from the 2 that are separated by an and that are in that last final portion of that particular phrase. So by turning on the Oxford comma, that will ensure that you always have that third one. Punctuation required within quotes should be set to inside, and space between sentences should be set to 1 space. Now the default used to be 2 under typewriters because every letter was the same width, whether it was a W or an I. And to provide a little bit of breathing room between sentences, make it easier to find the end of a sentence, the default for academic writing using typewriters used to be 2 spaces. Now that we use proportional fonts, and you will be using Times New Roman or something very close to that, we only need the 1 space. And so that actually, in a short document it does make a big difference, but in a long document that can make a huge difference as far as the spacing and all that. So essentially I want all of these turned on. The more of these that we turn on, the more that that Word will flag the problems, and the more likely we are to fix them, and the more likely you are to give me a paper that is as close to perfect as you can possibly get. So far I've shown you how to do the page numbers, including keeping the first page blank. I've shown you how to set your default paragraph settings so that you have proper double-space format for academic papers, and I've shown you how to set the grammar and style and spelling options in the proofing tool to basically check for everything, and that should almost instantaneously improve your writing, because as it flags more and more issues, you'll go back, you'll address them, and you probably turn in some of the best papers you've ever written in your entire collegiate career. There are a couple things I still want to cover. I want to cover how to do citations, and this is something you shouldn't be afraid of. This is something that Word handles very, very easily, especially for the formats that we need in this particular class, as well as MLA and APA and several of the other really standard formats. So the best thing for you to learn how to, the best reason for you to learn how to use this is that you can apply this in other classes as well. And so let's take a look at that right now. So what I want you to do is you're typing along, and let's say you want to put in a citation here. Now this already has one. This is a document that I've worked on multiple times over the years, and I'm going to not save the changes so I can mess it up a little bit here. But let's say that we want to add a reference right here where I've inserted the cursor. So come up here to your menu bar and click on References, and you'll notice that right here in the middle is an option to insert citation. Now notice that on my system here there's an endnote. This is something that as a Fresno State student or faculty or staff you can download from the Fresno State Library. It is an expensive program, but it is an amazing program. It does 30,000 different types of citation formats. Every publication out there has slightly different standards. EndNote knows them all, and every update it adds more and more and more, and it gets more and more flexible. The beauty of EndNote is that it stores every citation that you ever created into a database, and then you can use those in future documents. It's fully integrated with Word. It's as if it's part of the program. It's an add-on. If you're a Fresno State student and you're going to go to grad school especially, go download EndNote and learn how to use it. In lieu of that, for your undergraduate papers, though, I really feel that most of what you need to do you can do right here in this section that I'm circling with the cursor right now, this section that says Citations and Bibliography. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to check here and make sure that it's set to Chicago. You'll notice that it does APA, also does MLA, does a few others. It doesn't do Turabian very well, so if you have to write a history paper, EndNote does Turabian beautifully. Not so beautiful in Word. I have it because I need it, but I'd never ever use it. I use EndNote for all my Turabian stuff. But you can use the Chicago here. So click on Chicago. That is the format that is the official Anthropology citation format as deemed by the American Anthropological Association. So our cursor is sitting here. Let's say that this is not Fentress and Wickham. We're going to put in something else just so that we can play with it here. Click on Insert Citation, and you'll notice that I'd already put one in here. John Smith, Applied Anthro at Fresno State. It was a made-up situation. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a new source, and let's put in Jones, James. It's not a corporate officer. It's where this happens to be in a journal article. You'll notice here you can set it for all kinds of stuff. Books, book sections, journal article, article and periodical, a whole bunch of different options. More than likely you're going to be doing either a book section, or a journal article for anything in this particular class. So the title of this is going to be Anthro Applied to Ag. And it's in the Agricultural Anthropology Journal. I don't believe, there probably is one, but I don't know that this is an actual title or not. It was published in 2017, and it's on pages 145 to 176. That is all you need to do. And now click OK, and right here it inserts a properly formatted citation. Now, what I want you, and this should have a period after it that will hook it to what comes before. Remember, Fentress and Wickham aren't really there. This is just to illustrate how this goes. The next thing I want you to do is go to the very end of your document, add a page. Now ignore what I've got on the screen here because that's my old works cited page, but I'm going to come up here, and if you go here to where it says bibliography and you click works cited, it will create a properly formatted works cited with the things that are actually applied, actually stuck into this document. It will put it in, it'll do it alphabetically, it'll create it. So every citation that you would use in that document, you would end up with entries back here. And it will look like this if you have a long enough document. This happens to be the prior works cited page that was for the document that I'm playing around in here. I just pulled it up to give you something to look at. So that's how you let Word do citations for you. You just click Insert Citation. If the document has already got that citation in it, it will have saved it. You won't have to retype it. This will also keep track of everything that you've added. And then you can come over here and set up your actual works cited page by going to the end and clicking on works cited, and it will set it up for you. You don't have to know how to do this stuff. You can simply look at what's there and what's within Word, and it'll work fine. Before we move away from citations, I want to cover again the basics for this particular class so that you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You must cite every fact, every thought, every paraphrase, every quote, in fact, anything you got from anywhere. If you're going to tell me the sky is blue, I'll probably let you get by. If you want to tell me how the sky is blue or why the sky is blue, I need a citation. So anything that is not really common knowledge, you must have a citation. You can only use, in this class, Chicago inline citation format. That is it. I will not accept MLA, APA, or any other format. It must be inline citations, and you must have a work cited page. Now, sometimes you'll label it a reference page, sometimes you'll label it a bibliography. You will get zeros for those, just like you'll get zeros if you don't include citations, right? No citations, you get a zero. No properly formatted works cited page, you'll get a zero. So you might want to do this, pay really close attention to this. I want a work cited page. That only includes works that are actually cited in the work. If you don't cite it, it doesn't belong there. And this is different from a reference page. In a reference page, you would put everything, not only the things that you cited, but things that led to your thinking. So everything you read on the subject would be included in a reference page. So that's all resources that you rely on when you're preparing the paper, whether or not you cite it. A bibliography, which you may be asked to write an annotated bibliography, so this is something you might want to pay a little bit of attention to, but a bibliography usually includes an exhaustive list of sources that relate to the topic. You may not have read any of them. It is just a list of books, a bibliography, bibliography study of. That's what you're doing. You're just compiling a list of books. So make sure that what you have is a works cited page, that everything that is cited is in the works cited page. Nothing that is in the works cited page is missing from the rest of the document. And you do not have a reference page or a bibliography. So now I want to get to talking about block quotes. And you'll see there are 2 pages here from this document that are just filled with quotations. Much of this particular portion of this document I was citing a lot of theory, and so I used the words of the theorists themselves and then put my commentary and my linking information between the quotes. So here's a long quote from Bourdieu, and you'll see that it's indented on both sides, so you half an inch on each side, so that it lines up perfectly right here with the regular paragraph indent. That way it just makes it neater as it does that. By indenting on this side over here, you also get a much cleaner break between the single-spaced block quote and the double-spaced text that is mine. You'll notice that there is no quotation marks at the beginning or at the end. Because you've got it set up as a block, it's already flagged that this is a quote, and then of course the citation is at the end. So you can see you come to the end of your regular thought in your paragraph, you hit enter, you come down. I would just type this all in. And going back to the styles that we talked about before, you'll notice I have a block quote style here. And essentially it does all of this formatting. It single spaces everything. It indents everything a half an inch. It doesn't indent the first line an additional half inch, and it indents this side at a half inch. So basically all I have to do is just put the cursor in the middle of the paragraph. It's a block quote, push the button, and it becomes a block quote. That's the easiest way to do this, and that's why styles become so important. If you set up styles for normals, for headings, for block quotes, much of your work can be automated. If you're writing a large document, the headings can be used to set up a table of contents. There's one other thing I wanted to point out about the block quotes, and that is the paragraph that follows. Now, everything that's on these 2 pages, you'll notice I have a paragraph, I have the block quote, and then I start a new paragraph. Now, if, and in this case, again, this is just for illustration, but let's say that my intention was that this block here is actually part of the paragraph that includes this and this. In other words, this follows on in the same paragraph. Rather than indent here, I would take this first line and remove the indent. That means that starting up here at Michael de Certeau and going all the way to here is a single paragraph. Otherwise, if this was the way it had been, this would be a paragraph, and this would be considered a paragraph. So this is why the indenting is so important. If we don't indent the first line of each paragraph, we really, especially when it comes to using block quotes, we really aren't clear if it's a new paragraph or it's a continuation of an existing paragraph. This really only covers the basics, what you need in order to write a paper for one of my classes. I think most of this will be applicable to your other classes. Spend some time knocking around the menus in Word and trying to learn some of the functions. You'll find that they're extremely useful, they're very powerful, and each of them makes your life so much easier. So I really encourage you to experiment and play, and I'm looking forward to your papers. Thanks for watching.